Good afternoon and welcome to You Can Revolutionize Your Fundraising Analytics Using Claude. I'm Paul Clolery. I'm editor-in-chief of the NonProfit Times. I'm here with my friends from Civis Analytics. They been around a long time. I've seen my old friend Roger Hama on the screen. One of my first calls whenever I have a problem and have a question on something, and I'm sure he gets tired of getting my calls. We've got Dan Wagner, founder and CEO of Civis Analytics, Laura Cleary, who's Director of Applied Data Science, and Roger, Strategic Growth Advisor over there at Civis Analytics. I'm sure you've got a lot of questions. Please send them in. You'll see a chat button, a question button up at the top of your screen. Send them to me. We'll get them all in as many as we can. Oftentimes when we have these webinars, we get the same question multiple times, so we'll wait a little bit, and then we'll get them over to our expert panels here. Everybody's talking about Claude, and we're here to help. The folks are here from Civis Analytics to answer some questions and see what's going on with your CRMs and how you can integrate it, Claude, and work with everything that's out there in terms of privacy, in terms of finding new donors, and basically you're using Claude to help you make some very important decisions. So we've got a lot of ground to cover and not a whole lot of time to do it. So Dan, I'm going to throw it to you and let you get started here.
Okay, great. Well, Paul, thanks so much for having us. And I look forward to this conversation about AI with all you. And thank you again for giving your time generously. We know your time is precious, so we're looking forward to the next hour. So my name is Dan Wagner. I'm the CEO of Civis Analytics. We are a data science and AI consulting and technology company that supports nonprofits around the world. I served as the Chief Analytics Officer for the 2012 Obama campaign, and ever since then, we've supported over 100 nonprofits to help them turn their data into impact. So today, it's about AI. What we do is we provide a data platform and deep expertise in artificial intelligence that are focused on helping nonprofits put AI to work usefully and immediately. So our agenda, we have 4 things to cover. The first thing is the nonprofit data challenge. The second is how fundraising and marketing leaders can use AI, focused on Claude for today for data. The third thing is we're going to talk about what makes AI work in practice. What are some of the technical things under the hood in order to support self-serve analytics around Claude and other AI solutions. And then finally, maybe most importantly, is where you can start to accelerate your own AI journey. Okay, so why we're here. We're not here just because of AI. We're here because we, as an industry, nonprofits and agencies, really need to rethink how we work with data. Most importantly is because there are a set of key challenges that we're all struggling with, because in many cases, the data and technology situation makes it hard to solve them. And here are 4 of those challenges that we're all familiar with. First, marketing returns are declining across the board, but it's hard for us to identify efficiency because the data is in different places and the time to do it is often not there. We don't fully understand what motivates our supporters or which messages actually work. We struggle to measure attribution. A story that we often hear from nonprofits and agencies is people give over direct response, they give over digital. How do you assign credit for that? If you can't assign credit, it makes it really hard to optimize investment. And this is a constant struggle that people have with their data. And maybe most importantly is we still manage donors transactionally. You have a segment, should they get 20 touches, 30 touches, et cetera. The kind of conventional analytics system around RFM has really reached its limits. And so we need to find a better way of doing it. I'm sure everyone is familiar with this kind of conversation between marketing and data. And it's often because the technology and data situation is so difficult. We've heard this called a difficult situation all the way up to a train wreck. And it's really hard. And it creates a lot of tension between data and marketing teams, especially because both are working extremely hard. Pretty much everybody is understaffed right now, and there's too much to do. And often marketing teams are forced, if they don't have a data team or their data team is really understaffed, they're forced to fill in the gaps with big spreadsheets. And we as a data company are always impressed by how the kind of complexity and the breadth of spreadsheets that people build. And often they're kind of assembling data from CRMs and other loose spreadsheets into a consolidated, let's call it a 10-tab monster with reports and pivot tables, et cetera. And every nonprofit, and I'm sure everybody in this room, has something like this, and it's incredibly valuable. But these things become hard to manage, produce dependencies, and often create a lot of risk if somebody in the organization quits who kind of is assigned to doing that, and that's not the best way to live. And these problems have existed for decades. And for many people who are professionals have existed at this has been a long time frustration. And now with these problems, it's increasingly urgent that we solve them. And AI finally creates a path that we can support, especially non-technical people who are suffering with these problems, get solutions in the near term. So we have spent the last 2 years really trying to understand what successful AI implementations have in common and what unsuccessful ones have in common, and what are some of the best practices that you as a nonprofit or you as an agency can implement to be successful with AI beginning immediately. And the answer isn't just a better language model. You kind of see those on your kind of different AI products. It's really about creating a system that in the end is empowering non-technical users to have a conversation with their data that is accurate and productive. And there's 3 elements to this that we're going to focus on in this conversation. The bottom 2 are technical. The one on top is going to be how people can use it. The one at the bottom is essentially your data layer, which we're all kind of familiar with. It's a clean one place where you can assemble your data from your source systems, get into one place, refresh it, and then create governance around it in terms of who can access that data. Above that is the context layer, and this is probably the most important part of AI, and we'll do our best to kind of unpack what that is. If you point your AI directly at your data layer, it's not going to give the right answers because it's not familiar with you and it's not familiar with your data. And so you really have to teach the AI what your data actually means. The marketing team provides input on KPIs, for example. A lapsed donor hasn't given in over a year. A major donor gives 1,000. You're teaching it what a major donor means. On your data team, you're teaching it, for example, the date when we entered a gift, not when it actually came in. And this becomes a set of tags and concepts where the model can talk to your data based on the definitions that you as an organization want. Now, once these 2 things are in place, and we'll do a lot to unpack this, AI becomes a practical tool. And we see best practices, non-technical users are able to analyze and report on their own, and we'll talk about that. And then also beginning to build tools with no code, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And so this is kind of what we'll run through with both Roger and Laura talking about this. 2 important things. One is you don't have to build all of this on day one. It can be a single use case, it can be a single CRM, but it does need to have these components: consolidated data that updates, proper permissions, context that you can use to talk between the model and the data, and this capability for somebody to report. So it can be something as narrow as, all right, I want to find how my direct response campaigns are performing. You can do it in that single use case. The second thing I want to mention is we're going to provide this through the view of our own data platform, which is about the context layer and the data layer. That's because what we know, how we serve our customers, but you might have your own system, your own AI products that you can use, and these lessons will be generally applicable. But as we talk, we're going to be the form of how we do it, but those best practices are going to be wider than that. The final thing is AI is a collaboration between marketing data, especially around building your context layer in this collaboration, but it looks very different than the conventional model and the conventional conversation with this kind of like back and forth jockeying around reports, et cetera. We're going to talk about the marketing and fundraising team, have deep expertise. They know the data, they know the questions that they want to answer, and then the data team who knows how to build the underlying infrastructure to do it, but can help build it in a way that it persists and can create value, minimizes some of the back and forth, but it helps non-technical people empower them and revolutionize their fundraising analytics, in this case with Claude, but more widely as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Roger, longtime industry expert. He's going to talk about how fundraising and marketing leaders can use AI in practice. And thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thanks, Dan. You can go to the next page. So I'm Roger Hiyama. I'm a longtime veteran of the nonprofit industry, having worked at both agencies and data companies over the years, but I truly represent a non-technical user. I don't know how to write HTML code. I've never published a web page. I have never written code in Python, but I have a tremendous amount of experience. And over the years, I have been able to envision reports that I've always wanted to build. Or I remember reports that I built in prior companies, and there was a dependency on the data team, the analysts, the programmers, that in many cases would take weeks and even months to generate something that, frankly, today is being done very much in real time. And so today, what I'm going to focus on is the use of an AI tool, in this case, Claude, that I've used for a number of different reasons. But I'm not going to focus on the conversational prompts that just get quick answers. When I started at Civis 4 months ago, I was really intrigued by what a non-technical user could do to build dashboards and reports they could use throughout their work. And the types of reports, in many cases, that I'm talking about are ones that each of us as marketing or fundraising professionals have in the back of our head. We know these are the bits and types of data we want to look at. The beauty of the new tools is the data visualization. And instead of looking at a wall of numbers, we can turn them into charts and visualizations that really hit the point. And so today, I'm going to focus on showing you how I've built a number of dashboards in order to test out what Claude can do. So the use case here is one that most direct marketers are very aware of. And it's trying to identify during the acquisition process how many donors may have received a direct mail piece that didn't respond through the direct mail channel, but they instead gave through online channels. So over history and dating back 10, 15 years, the percentage of lost or percentage of additional online attributable revenue was in the 7 to 10, maybe 13% range. Today, that number is significantly higher, driven mainly by the increase in postage, inability of people to find checkbooks, and quite frankly, it's the people that have found a much more efficient way for them to transact with their charity of choice. So what I wanted to do was set out to build a number of reports. One of them was this acquisition matchback report. So go to the next page. So within Claude, it really starts with a detailed prompt with goals and inputs defined. And it starts with a conversation. I'm going to show you an online thing as well here in a few minutes to show you the actual report, but also show you the Claude session that created this. But these are just excerpts from that Claude session. But I ask it to build a report. I tell it the 4 primary tables that are needed to produce this report. The goal of the report is to identify people who had received a direct mail piece, meaning they were on that acquisition promotional finder file, that transacted within a 60-day time range from campaign mail date. What I want to try to do is identify how many gifts and total gift amount that could be rightly attributed to direct mail that came in through online means. So I hit enter. I end up, believe it or not, within a minute, first it came back and it asked me a few questions, and it said, good, I found a previous dashboard, so it knew what it was going to, the format it was going to put in with colors and everything. And it asked me a few questions, and then at the bottom of the page here, it says, I now have all context I need. Let me read the Excel skill set and then build both deliverables. Next page. Within a minute, it came back on the left with telling me what the report did. And on the right side of my screen, which I'll show you when we do the demo, it had rendered the first iteration of the report. And this was like the big aha moment that, oh my gosh, it took less than a minute for Claude to develop out the dashboard. And from that point forward, it was a matter of just me reviewing it, identifying changes that I wanted to make. Claude is not imperfect, or Claude is imperfect in many respects, and you need to still check things. So I was going through and addressing some of those things. So I went through really 6 or 7 iterations, but it was really the first 2 or 3 where the major changes came. And in each one of those iterations, it took roughly a minute. The one where I had significant changes that I added, I changed my mind. That took a total of 4 minutes for it to reprogram and produce the web page. Next page.
Hey, Roger.
Yes.
We do have a question. One of the listeners wants to know, what is the shape of the data sets or data set or data sets you are pointing to Claude to?
Yeah, in this particular case, it was pretty simple, but it's usually the 4 data tables that most fundraisers use. It's there's a gift table, there's the donor master table, and there's a campaign history file. But in this case, I also had a finder file which identified those people that actually received the mail piece, and these were all tables. Which, another fascinating thing about Claude is I can iterate within the Civis platform, and I get a lot of advantages, which Laura's going to discuss later with a contextual layer. But within my first iteration of many of these reports, Claude was able to build out a sample set of data on the fly that could produce the report. And in fact, this case, Claude actually developed its own test data set using the context of everything I added previously.
Roger, let me just jump in there 1 second. I see a lot of people raising their hands. Please, if you've got a question, go over into the chat area and type it in there, and then we can go from there. And Roger, there was a follow-up. Did you connect to an external data source, or you uploaded the data?
Yeah, in this case, I actually prototyped the report within Claude, and then I gave it to our technical people to connect it to a real data set of live data. So in this case, it was partly a prototype. I iterated, I got the final report, and then I sent it to Laura. In other cases, if I'm working directly in the platform, I'll just build it directly using Claude, and it's even faster, and the context is already set. And Laura will go into that later on in the demo. Okay. After about this took me over a course of a day or so to build this, because I wasn't working on it full time. But I would see an iteration, I would review it, and then I'd think of, well, gosh, it would look nicer this way. But eventually I got what I wanted. I said thank you, and it provided a brief little summary at the end. So next page. Okay, so we're actually going to go to a live demo, and I'm going to share my desktop, and I'm going to show you a couple of things. And Roger, I think I need to get you to allow me to share my screen. Dan, okay. So what I'm going to share here first is actually my session of Claude. So the screenshot I showed in the very first image was my initial prompt. Well, my initial prompt was a little bit more detailed, but it wasn't significantly more detailed. I talk a little bit about the linkages between the various files. I talk about the filters that I'd like, because most of the dashboards that I'm building, I want to create something that I can use over time, or that other people can use with their data as well. And so, and then I defined the time windows for the attributable gifts. And that second screen I showed was what Claude was saying. And you can see here at 11:48, I submitted that. And at 11:49, it had already finished with the first iteration of the dashboard. Now, on the right-hand side, as I'm iterating and building, Claude will just display the new dashboard on the right so that I can review it and I can expand it and go to other places as well, make it a full page. But then I just iterate and tell it the additional things I want to add or change. And we went through this 6 or 7 times, mainly because there was a challenge or a problem with the map and the way it was rendering. But you can see here, I asked for a couple of changes that were different, but it just iterates, and I'd get a brand new one on the right side of the screen in real time as it would build out. And eventually, I ended up getting the report I wanted. Again, you can see I've got a map that's still not drawn to scale, so I had challenges with that. Somewhere later on, I was having challenges with the hovering tool. It quickly fixed that, but then I also asked to save it to a PDF, which it added the functionality. That was within a minute. And then I reviewed the PDF, and it wasn't rendering quite right. I submitted a change, and that was the final one. So over on the side here, I'm getting a new iteration every single time that I went through this. Now, the other thing that Claude can also do is, there's my full screen. But one of the things that Claude can do is I asked it to create a little documentation, and it was able to create this documentation on the fly within a minute or so. And I could have used this either as a marketing piece or as an internal piece to share with my team. So the one other thing that I could have done within my work is I could have asked Claude questions. How many total source codes?
Hey, Roger. When you're talking about the source codes and all, we do have a question here. They
Yes.
wanted to know if this is a dynamic dashboard or a point in time.
This is actually the way it was built as prototype was a point in time, but Laura's going to explain how we deal with these things to put them into production. Okay, so I can ask a number of different questions. This isn't very useful because the data set isn't all that rich, but I could, again, just ask conversational questions of the data here within this. But my sample set just isn't very rich the way Claude created it. So next thing I'm going to show is the actual report. And so I'm actually going to start with the dashboard of reports, but I've created all kinds of reports throughout, and I have multiple iterations of many. And I think in total, I created upwards of 17, 18 reports over a 2-week period. The attribution matchback report, this is what the live actual report looks like within the platform. And so in this case, I can look at one campaign or many campaigns. If I do one campaign, it doesn't provide this, but if I have many campaigns, it shows me the gift count lift and the revenue lift for each one of those campaigns. If I want to look at different windows of time, I could use different time frames of the attribution window, and I'll set it back to all 4. But there's a table of summary by campaign. There's a table for each source code represented. There's a response curve that shows a response curve of of the direct mail in purple. The green is the online gifts. You can see the 47, almost 50% lift coming from a number of gifts that were online and a 34% lift in revenue. So when we think about some of the challenges we're having, for me being able to create this report really in an hour, Claude spent 10 minutes on it. It gives me information that I can then use strategically to help me in my budgeting and my optimization. And it was something that just doesn't exist in a CRM reporting package. And that's why this is so important. You can see here the demographic information, and I included a map. But the way that Claude can publish these things, create them, and create these prototypes is just amazing. But it really puts access to this data at our fingertips. And it leverages the experience I have without having to go through programmers and data analysts and whatnot. They can work on more important things, and I can work on things that I'm just interested in looking at. Okay, so I'm going to quit sharing here.
Let me just jump in here for a second, Roger. We've got a lot of questions coming up, folks. I've seen the slides. I know some of these questions are going to be answered shortly, and if they're not in the slides, we will in fact get to them because we've got a long list of questions, and we'll get to them, I promise.
Great. Next slide. So this was just a little thing with small pictures of some of the dashboards. Creating revenue reports, you can do virtually anything. I created ones that broke it down by generational cohort, by channel certainly, acquisition break even. I had a report that would project out at what month each campaign and even each list source would break even, and also calculated lifetime value. So a lot of these reports were straight queries of the database, but others used quite a bit of Python coding in order to get them. But it just shows the how rich the experience can be. All right, next.
Okay, thanks, Roger. I'm Laura Cleary. I'm a data scientist at Civis, director of our professional services team, but I've been working with data and technology for, over 12, 13 years. So I'm going to talk about how to make sure this all works. And some of the questions have already kind of alluded to some of the additional work that it takes to get this in production. So next slide, Dan. So yeah, here's a little cartoon that Claude made of me reining Roger in as he throws all of his amazing dashboards in the air and celebrates all of his success. A lot of the data folks are probably thinking about, okay, how do we make sure that Roger gets the right metrics? How do we know he's using the right data table? How do we know that everything is correct and accurate and up to date? So I'm going to talk about all of those things in the next few slides. So as Dan mentioned earlier, we're recommending this kind of three-tiered approach to how to set all of this up. The first one being the data layer. So that's bringing all of your data into a data warehouse so that it can be labeled and organized and provision access to the correct people. And obviously, you know, lots of nonprofits have a lot of different CRMs and other data sources that they want to bring in, so it can be quite daunting to think about making one large data warehouse. So you don't have to do all of your data sources we have here at the bottom to get started on this. You can start with a specific use case or 1 to 2 data sources to get yourself going. And then once you have your data all in your data warehouse, the next step is to layer in that context. And that's a combination of, you know, Roger's team's information about how they define a lapsed donor or major donor, or how they want to think about their metrics and KPIs, and then context from either the internal data team or the data partner, such as Civis, about kind of what all the different columns in the data mean, which date to use in which context, which rows to exclude, all of the little gotchas that you often have in your data warehouse that can cause your numbers to look a little wonky if you don't take them into account. And then finally, you have the AI layer. So that's bringing in Claude or some other AI tools to help you analyze this data and build these reports. And one thing that Roger kind of mentioned a little bit is that we do have the MCP server. MCP server is Model Context Protocol, and that essentially allows you to set up your Claude to talk directly to your data warehouse. So in some cases, Roger is building reports using prototype data sets and test layouts, and in other cases, he's directly connecting to the database itself and using the MCP to query directly from the tables to make the metrics actually what they would be if it were using the live data. And Paul, I see you raising your hand.
We just had a question here, and I think we need to just a little bit of clarity.
Sure.
One question said, this started off in Claude, but is now showing off in a Civis platform. I'm confused. Basically, guys, what happened here was you have to have a platform to be able to use the Claude, so they're using the Civis platform to show you how the Claude is working.
That's right. And you can build things in Claude, and it can generate a PDF or an HTML report, something you could download and share around, or even share within your Claude instance as an organization. But what I'm going to talk about in a few slides is how we're using the Civis platform to productionize this so it schedules on a regular basis to be updated. So you could connect to other kind of database dashboard visualization services to be able to render the report elsewhere if you wanted it connected to your data live. Claude kind of makes an artifact, is what it's called in Claude. That's more of a static object. Okay, next slide. So just getting a little bit more into unifying your data. I know folks are very familiar with lots of messy data problems and having duplicates and having test rows and kind of problems with dates and all these things. Claude isn't going to wave a magic wand at all of this. Our kind of common phrase we use in data science is garbage in, garbage out. You do still have to do some of the foundational work to clean up your data and get it all in one place. But like I mentioned before, it doesn't have to be an all-in-one shot type of thing. It can be more of an incremental, staged approach. And then we have, of course, the context. So like I said, bringing together that marketing and other contextual information that Roger and others supply to help the data team understand what the goals are, what the metrics are, how to think about the donors and how to segment them, and how to kind of create these consistent formats. So you saw in Roger's report, he had different look back windows, and setting those windows in your context layer can help you get consistent results, no matter whether you're just querying Claude for a quick answer or whether you're trying to build a dashboard. It'll kind of use those same breakdowns throughout just to make sure that everything's consistent and that you're reporting properly. And then, of course, from your data team or your data partner, oh, sorry, Dan, just one sec, that specific data context, knowing the columns, knowing the rows, knowing where the duplicates are and how to remove them, which date fields to use, all of that kind of detail about the data can go into this context layer as well to help make sure that your answers are as correct as they can be. So then next slide. One way to do this is with Claude is a Claude skill. So this is essentially kind of a package of documentation that helps route your plain language questions in Claude to the correct analytics solution. So here we've kind of put together just an example of what this skill could look like, where users might ask about like different donor segments. And then there's a separate file that outlines all the segments that this organization might think about, and then also provides SQL templates so that the queries that Claude is putting together reference the tables properly. So this is kind of how those two pieces come together in Claude, is through this skill, and then that can be loaded and shared across the organization. And then next slide. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have the Civis MCP, which allows you to collect connect Claude to your data warehouse itself. So that's where you move beyond just prototyping with fake data or made up metrics and actually use your data. And then coupled with the Claude skills is where you really get your answers that are accurate and specific to your organization, because not every organization would define a lapsed donor using the same date range or the same columns in their data frame. So making sure that it's looking specifically at the things that you want it to look at. Also, a data warehouse can have tons of different tables, and there might be different versions. And so, the data team might be quite familiar with, oh, I need to query this table when I'm looking at this metric. So you can teach Claude all of that through the skills. Next slide. And then just going back to kind of how do you get from Roger's report in his Claude artifact into the Civis platform, where you can have it as a live artifact that is being shared with the team and refreshed regularly. So the way Claude works is you're asking it to build out the report at a point in time. So it will often query your database and maybe even use the same, or it will use the correct data, but it will not be refreshing on a regular basis. It will put those numbers directly in the report and show them to you. So Roger passed off his artifact to us on the data team, and we were able to see all of the backend code that Claude generated and then connect it to the actual data tables in the Civis platform, confirm all the calculations, make sure everything was kind of matching out, and then set it up using Civis's data platform to automate on a regular basis. So you can schedule it like daily or weekly or even every 5 minutes if you wanted to refresh. And then it can be shared with Roger's team. So if you were doing this just with Claude, you would have to go in and kind of prompt it to refresh each time you wanted it. Versus with the Civis platform, you're able to set that up to automatically refresh on a regular basis. So rather than the months it might have taken to go back and forth and get all of Roger's colors and charts the way he wants and all the metrics calculated perfectly, it was just, a little bit of time for the data team to translate all of that code into something that could be automated on a regular basis. And then just to kind of summarize some best practices for data security and governance, bringing all the data together into a centralized location can really help with organization and access, and also routing Claude to the correct tables. But once you have it there, you want to keep access tight. So I'm not going to grant Roger on the entire data warehouse if all he needs to see are those 4 tables. It's also going to confuse him and Claude if there's access to thousands of tables when he really only needs 4. So keeping that limited really helps with security, but also getting the right answers. And then we're also recommending masking PII, so setting up tables so that the ones going into the AI do not have name and address and other personal identifiable information, just to keep things even more secure. And then finally, and most importantly, maintaining and documenting. So keeping all those Claude skills and other contextual pieces up to date. If you change a metric internally, you need to update your documentation so that Claude, as part of your team, understands that that metric has changed. And that's really what will keep those answers being correct on a regular basis. So that kind of summarizes how to put this all together. I know there were a few questions, Paul, so do you feel like that covered it?
Yeah, Dan, were you going to jump in with any more slides or?
Yeah, we have another section. I just wanted to make sure that we covered the questions that were there.
The questions that are coming in tend to do with personally identified information, and how what special considerations do you take in dealing with PII? I mean, we all know of a couple of situations where data got out of a CRM and it posed a problem for some organizations. So, how within Claude are we dealing with the privacy data?
Yeah, so that's where we're recommending that you mask the PII, and then the tables that you're accessing through Claude are those masked tables that just have an ID that maps back to the person. And so that's where when you set up your data warehouse, you could have sort of internal data or IT teams have access to all the PII, but then maybe once I give it to Roger, I will only give him the table with the ID. You can also set up the MCP server within Civis to limit to certain tables and schemas, or use additional tightened credentials when setting up the MCP, so that those credentials only have access to a very limited set of data if there was another purpose that Roger would need the PII.
But most CRMs will lock it down so that the data won't go outside your system, correct?
So what we typically do is sync it with the Civis platform, and then the database connects to Claude. And so that's where we're recommending the limited approach. I do believe there are some AI tools that you could connect directly with your CRM. So the recommendations would be different there.
Got it. All right. Continue on, please.
Okay, that wraps up my section. So I'm going to pass it back to Dan, who's going to demo just another one of our AI tools that we've built.
Great. So the problem, once people build a set of business intelligence capability leveraging Claude, there's a new opportunity that people can have going on where they can think about either agents or tools that can solve other recurring data problems in a marketing or fundraising organization. And I'm going to walk through one thing that we built as a demonstration of the types of tools that people can build that kind of go beyond that next step of reporting or business intelligence. Obviously, we're going to demonstrate what we built, but the general lesson can be applied for anyone who's thinking about taking the next step in AI beyond reporting. So this is a tool called Audience Builder, and it's a very simple concept. And that concept is, how do I use Claude to generate lists of people basically by writing SQL against a database that I can use to export to any of my CRMs that I'm already connected to. And so the way that it works is very simple. I have a data set, and Roger talked about the 4 that we had, in this case 2 current and former donors, prospects. And I would select that. And what it does is it will produce up for me a chat interface that I can use to talk directly against the data. And so, for example, in this case, I have current and former donors, 28 columns available. This is similar to the table that Roger already built. So now I'm having a different conversation. And now I can start to, instead of just building a report, I can start to actually build segments from it using Claude on the back end that I can then export to my CRMs. So for example, you can ask me active donors in Ohio with recurring gifts, etc. And I'll say lapsed donors that have given more than $1,000. And what Claude will do via Civis is it'll write a SQL statement. And I don't, in this case, I'm mimicking a marketing person who doesn't know SQL. And it'll show up right here. And so that's hidden. But what I have is an audience of 8,428 people. I can say only people in Ohio, for example. It'll continue to narrow it. And that basically, that SQL that Claude is writing on the bottom corner, that's updating. It also will produce a set of charts here on the right, donor relationship status, number of donations made, channel, etc. And these are auto-generated. In this case, this is using Claude through Amazon, but same principle. And then once that's done, I have a set of pre-built integrations with my CRMs. If I want to push it to Salesforce, for example, I could say lapsed donors. This is a little bit technical, but insert means I just drop it into the database. I can map it, etc. And then I can push it right to Salesforce. And again, this is leveraging Claude in a different way, where instead of writing a set of complex Python, etc., this is just building a set of very simple SQL using conversational AI to write that. It writes that in my database, and then I can kind of go from there. Or more simply, maybe I just want to export it. I push it like that, and then I can see my progress right away. So this is another example of, as you think about what is the next step beyond just baseline reporting, the next step is how you're building tools that help enable the marketing workflow using AI in the back end beyond reports that can really kind of support the roles that you have, minimize labor, and allow people to focus on some of the critical tasks that you have around fundraising, et cetera. And this is the next step in the journey. But I do want to take a little bit of a step back and say, where do we start? I'll turn it over to Roger to talk. We've talked about these kind of two parts of the journey. One is building complex reports, self-serving marketing teams, just kind of larger journey around tools. But Roger, where do you think we begin?
I'll tell you what, we're at an exciting juncture in the evolution of fundraising. To think that somebody like me, without any technical skills, can access data in ways that can drive strategic decisions is very exciting. One of the things that we would recommend is to prototype, iterate, publish, and then share. I mean, one of the things, we have a number of clients that are agencies as well. And what we found is that nonprofits and agencies really haven't been able to dig into the power of AI. And so part of our goal here is to show you some of the things that we're doing that you're capable of doing either by yourself with a separate data partner, or we would welcome you to contact Civis for any advice or consulting. But we're at a very exciting time within fundraising and the use of AI.
Okay, we're going to jump into some of the questions now. One of the questions, and we've seen this a couple of times, why is Claude the best product to do this with? Why not Chat or some of the other AI that's out there? Why is Claude the best thing since indoor plumbing?
I can jump in here a little bit. I mean,
Okay.
I think that a lot of the tools can do valuable things. So if you don't have Claude, I don't think you should feel like you can't get started here. We have just found that the structure of Claude and the combination of skills and the way it can connect to Civis platform has kind of created a very powerful combination for us. But we know, a lot of our clients are using Copilot and things like that. So there's no one right answer. There's lots of ways that you can work with these tools. Just Claude has been the best combination for us.
And anybody jump in, Dan, Laura, Roger here. If I have a spreadsheet in Google Drive, can I share that with Claude to create a dashboard? And each time I update the spreadsheet, will that dashboard in Claude update as well?
Well, I can answer the first part of it, because I actually built a few dashboards by importing Excel documents that were very difficult reports to read as a 70-column spreadsheet. So I was able to build dashboards pretty easily by importing it. Will it update by itself, Laura? My answer is no. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say no as well. I think there are probably potentially ways you could set it up with Google so that it would update, but I think that would take more finagling than what you would automatically get from Claude.
All right, we have another one. Again, another security issue question. Can you say more about how to mask personally identifiable information? If I'm understanding correctly, there's still a lot of setup with tech IT data to get started using this. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that you can mask PII. One of the ways that we do it at Civis involves using the ID that comes out of our identity resolution solution. So we have a tool that will resolve IDs across Salesforce and other CRMs and kind of combine it into one person. And so we typically use that ID. And I would say that probably most database tables would have an ID that would correlate back to that individual row. So it would essentially be just creating a separate table or view that removes those PII columns and keeps that ID. And yes, I think there is a little bit of tech setup if you want to do this properly. You can get started with prototyping like Roger did in terms of just using fake data or kind of dummy data if you're worried about any of those implications, but you will want to set it up, kind of do a little bit of setup and foundational work if you want to get the right answers.
All right. Does this have any sort of data verification built in? Does Claude have any sort of data verification built in? How much of it do you feel like you need to verify it and check?
I would say you still need to check everything. You know, you can point it to the right tables and tell it your calculations, but it's still always a good idea to check. And as with everything, it's kind of a comfort level. If you're just trying to get a back of the envelope number, you might feel a little bit more comfortable going with what it says if it passes the vibe check. But, you know, if you're about to invest $3 million on a big campaign or something like that, that's where you, even with AI, you want to make sure everything's correct.
Ken, here's a crossover question with regard to data and the and direct mail. Does this include USPS, hygiene, CAS, and COA to best match on people? And does Claude know how to run data unification or identify resolution to match people, or does it use its own matching logic? Trying to understand how Claude knows what to do to clean match PII data using the Civis tool.
Yeah, so at Civis, we actually have functions to do NCOA and CAS and identity resolution. So typically we run that all through our kind of core software platform tools. So then you're pointing Claude at your clean data. You certainly could try to do some of that with Claude, but like we're recommending, it's best to have that data foundation and do all of that work upfront, just because you just can't tell as much what Claude's doing with individual rows and things like that. And you don't want to pass the PII through Claude if you can avoid it.
This might be more of a Roger question. How do you know when you've given it enough context? How do you know how much context it needs? Is there a test you run to find out?
I tell you, one of the things that I was amazed at is how little information I had to provide for it to contextually build a pretty amazing data set. If I had seen the reports and saw that something didn't look right, I would say something to Claude and it would say, oh, I'll fix the data set if you're telling me that, you know, online gifts are usually larger than direct mail gifts. And so there was a little bit of back and forth, but I was amazed at how good Claude was in the early ones. But then in working with Laura in creating these skills based on the work I had done in various dashboards, Claude just kept getting better and better and better. And I think that is, you know, something that was clear to me. In the beginning, I added a lot of contextual data as I was describing the report. But when I was building directly from platform, I didn't provide much of any contextual data because it already existed in the skills and in the data definitions and table definitions that are built into the platform.
All right. What insights did you capture by understanding donors that donate via online from direct mail pieces? Did you make any changes to future mailings based on that information?
Well, I certainly would. These were certainly just templates of reports that I think any nonprofit would want. But one of the challenges in fundraising is it's difficult to understand where what outbound promotional activity resulted in a gift. And one of the challenges, especially in direct mail, is people only count the ones that go through the lockbox with handwritten checks. And as a society, we know that people are changing the way they transact. More people are going online. They're doing a Google search on the name of the company, and they're making their way to a donation page. Well, when that happens, you lose all tracking ability back to that original campaign. So if you're getting 30% less income and upwards of 45 to 50% fewer donors, you would probably say, well, direct mail's not working. But what we know, because we created those attribution windows, and the curves of the attribution windows were similar for direct mail and online, that it was the direct mail campaign that was actually helping the online people make the donation. So it's just one of those challenges in today's world as people are trying to determine what's the best way for me to manage my overall expense budget. Reports like this are certainly invaluable And these are also reports that you're not going to find within your CRM. They just don't exist.
Okay, we've got one or two more. We're down to about 5 minutes here. I missed somebody who came in late. I missed where did they get the male, female, and household income data? Was it provided from CRM or searched and calculated from AI?
In this case, it was created. Claude created it as part of my data set because I asked for it. But in the Civis world, we actually have a base demographic file that we load for reporting purposes and optionally for data append. But when we can provide that breadth of demographic information, you're now able to look at your fundraising results, not looking at segments, but actually looking at real people. And I think especially as we get into some more of the interesting things we're working on, and we're trying to understand not transactionally, but why do people give? Like how do they connect with your mission? Who are they? What are the characteristics? Those are the things that we think are going to help change the way people are even segmenting data. Question comes out, why do we still mail somebody 30 times when the number of gifts has stayed at 2.4 to 2.6 gifts per donor? If we knew more about what was motivating that donor, we could do a better job of managing our budget and providing promotions and creative and stories that resonate with the donor and why they give. So I think all of this demographic data that we have available within our platform is information that will transform the way that fundraisers start thinking about their strategies in managing their donor files.
All right, we've only got a couple of minutes left. Any final words, Dan, Laura, or Roger? Speak now? Okay. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. I'm Paul Clolery. I'm editor-in-chief of the NonProfit Times. Get in touch with the folks at Civis, info@civisanalytics.com. They'll answer any of your questions. And as I said, Roger and Laura are people I use as a resource, so they're very good at what they do. Please take an opportunity to go to the nonprofittimes.com, see all the stories that we have up there. We've got some breaking news up there right now with regard to the IRS and how they're trying to change the definition of charity and in some new regulations. So please go to the Nonprofit Times, sign up for our e-letters, take a look at the website, and you will be getting an email with a link to this presentation. So if we went a little too quickly for you, or you missed a point, or you need some more information, you can go back and look at the video, and hopefully that'll answer your questions, or you can send an email over to the good folks at Dan, Laura, or Roger, and I'm sure they'll be happy to answer your questions. Again, I'm Paul Clolery. I'm with the Nonprofit Times. Thank you to everyone who signed up for this event and who attended. We'll see you at the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.